You're listening to the Sticks in the Six podcast. Here are your co-hosts, Andrew Forbes, Peter Barricini, and Alex Hobson.
Oh, Peter, it's been quite a long time since we touched base. A nice little hour-long, let's call it an intermission, I guess. Like those theater shows where you go and you get a quick minute to jump up, take a piss and get back into your seat before the show goes on. But anyways, we are back because your host here fucked up with the time difference between us and Sweden. So we are getting Mikael Tellqvist on. We figured we'd do a live show, do a quick live interview here with him. He's all set to jump on. We're just hoping Alex will be jumping on in the next few minutes here, and we can get going. But yeah, it's going to be a fun little episode. I think fun little chat with Mikael. Obviously, he's got some goaltending background. He can give us a little insight into the position itself, but also playing for a couple of teams, and one of them being the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I don't know much if you remember anything about Mikael Tellqvist with his time with the Leafs, but yeah, I mean, former third-round pick, 70th overall, and it's a name that rings the bell when it's mentioned, right?
Yeah, not like one of those names where you seem to forget that he was a Maple Leaf, considering that, given the time, like how the Maple Leafs goaltending situation was playing out, you obviously had your starter, then you had your backups, but he was in a kind of like a middle ground role where he was playing a backup at certain points as well. And yeah, I remember him. Obviously, it was at the time where the playoff glory days were coming to an end, and he got a few seasons in post lockout with the Maple Leafs before being traded to the Arizona Coyotes. I remember that trade happening as well. But yeah, I remember a goalie who gave it his all every single time he was on the ice and whenever he was called upon. Minimal experience minimal games with the Maple Leafs, only 40, but over 4 years. But, still donned the Maple Leafs, still gave it his all, and still played his heart out no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of many names that kind of fly under the radar when you talk about former Leafs, but one that definitely, like I said, rings a bell with anybody who's been watching the Leafs for as long as we have. We're going to try and get him on here as soon as possible. And hopefully, as I mentioned, we'll get Alex back in here ASAP as well to get us going. But yeah, it's like I said, it's going to be a fun little episode. I think we got a lot to discuss with him. Obviously, he's out in Sweden. He's working as a goaltending coach now. Yeah, just a good little grab here, I think, for the show.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And, considering that he is a goaltending coach right now, he's parting his wisdom and his experience to, the younger generation as well right now. I think that's always key when you have a player that was in the show for the longest time, or for the time that he's been in, still, serve as a mentor for players and kids coming up right now. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to hear what he's going to have to say about his experience as a goaltending coach as well. Even in his post NHL career playing over there with certain stints as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, it's like we said, end of the season for us. Hopefully a big season 4 coming our way. The Hockey Podcast Network has done a wonderful job in rounding up some of the best shows around the world right now when it comes to hockey. I know Offside Hockey also just joined the Hockey Podcast Network as well. So that's good to see James get in there and get on. But here we are. We'll bring Mikael in now. Good afternoon, Mikael Tellqvist. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. Can you hear me good or no?
We can, yes.
Loud and
thank
clear.
you so much. Loud
Perfect.
and clear. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah.
So we want to first off welcome you to Sticks in the Six. Played parts of 7 seasons in the NHL with our Toronto Maple Leafs, as well as the Buffalo Sabres and Phoenix Coyotes at the time. Now back home in Sweden, goaltending coach. We want to first off welcome you to the Sticks in the Six podcast.
Perfect. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It's been a long time since I did did a podcast or anything like this in English. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, well, we're glad you could take the time out to talk to us. I'll get us started here.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the goaltending position. I know we talk a lot about goaltenders tend to have superstitions a little bit, maybe more than some players in the locker room. Were you ever a superstitious guy, or what kind of superstitions do you have going before the game?
Well, actually, the older I got, the more superstitious I had. Actually, I was worse when I was younger, for sure. Just the way that I prepared during the game, I ate certain things. I took my pregame nap certain times. I put my pad on there a different way. I put my straps on one side, and then I switched sides and all that stuff. And so there was always I had almost too much there for a while. But as older I got, the less I actually did. So kind of settle in a little bit in my older age.
Michael Tay, obviously you were drafted by the Maple Leafs third round in 2000. Take us through where the draft process. Do you remember what happened when you got the call that the Maple Leafs selected you back then?
Yes, it's a little bit different than it is right now. I mean, obviously I was not attending the draft per se, so I was actually home in Sweden. We had this midsummer celebration, and I got a call from my agent telling me that I was picked in the 69 or 60, 68 overall, I think, in the third round, as you said. And pretty much you're drafted by Toronto Maple Leafs, and they're really excited. And they'll send you a jersey in a month or so. And that's pretty much it. And then obviously the scout here in Sweden called me the next day and congratulated me as well. But it took a little bit of time before I actually talked with somebody from the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I was going to say, what was your first interaction with the Leafs? Like, did you have any inclination that you were going to go to Toronto, or was there ever any kind of meeting prior to the draft that gave you that idea that they might be looking at you?
Well, I had some indications that they might be looking for a goaltender, but I did not expect to get drafted. It wasn't that much media thing around it. I mean, as it is right now, you can read all these rankings all the time. It wasn't even close to that. So, but well, obviously they wanted me to come over right away. I kind of had a special first year over here in Sweden. My first year as a pro player, I won the Swedish championship. So that was a big thing. And I won the championships for my hometown team of Djurgården here in Stockholm. So it was a big thing. And I played the World Championships. It was kind of a great start for me professionally. It kind of came quick, and then I got drafted, and then they said, like, we want you to come over right away. But I talked to some people back here in Sweden and my goalie coach, and they said, relax, just have another pro year over here in Sweden and you'll be more ready to go.
And how big was that extra pro year for you? Because you went to the AHL right after that, and then that's when you get called up to the Maple Leafs, and kind of like in 2002, 2003, and then 03, 04. So how big was that extra season good for your development?
Looking back at it, I'm not sure, but maybe. I mean, we actually won the second year as well. So it was obviously, for me personally, was a great chance to stay home and play pro. Looking back at it, it took me some time to adapt to North American style of play. I had to change a lot of things in my game to be ready to play. And back then, you weren't really getting the NHL games as you are right now. It feels like I'm a dinosaur here, but it's like it actually was like that. You should watch some highlights. You saw Mats Sundin score, you saw Peter Forsberg score, but it wasn't much of a. They weren't showing games regularly. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about the transition to the North American style and game. How, from your experience, obviously when younger players get drafted from Europe, that's always a big key factor for NHL teams. How is that for you going forward?
Well, for me personally, it was really tough. I came over. I was celebrated over here in Sweden and played a couple of World Championships, which is big over here. 2 Swedish championships. So my confidence was really high. coming into the training camp. Really great goalies in the system. I mean, you heard Curtis Joseph coming in. I mean, he's a icon in Toronto, and they were really hoping for me to step in as a backup behind him. But I think it was Corey Schwab. I think he came in and took that job, and I wasn't really ready. So for me, it was good to go and play in the AHL for sure. I wasn't ready to play in the big leagues. Let's put it that way.
Michael, first of all, I just want to jump in here and say,
yeah,
it's nice to meet
good
you.
To see you.
I'm looking forward to chatting with you. So I was personally thinking of one specific thing, which was I believe your last season with the Leafs, because that was the year that I fell in love with the team, and that's when I became obsessed with the rosters and looking up and down at the stats and all that. So that season, it was 2006, 2007. I think you were traded to Phoenix halfway through the year. That was my first year, like I said, first year looking at a roster for the first time, my first introduction to players like Matt Sundin and Darcy Tucker. And you had the ability to play for the same team as a lot of these guys. So what was it like sharing a room specifically with those two players, and what kind of impact did they have on the locker room?
Well, I think all those players you mentioned, Toronto is a special place to play. Let's put it that way. Everybody knows that, but it's really unique, and it doesn't matter what background you have. Like, you're interested in hockey. Some people I met like could barely say hello in English, but they knew I was a Toronto Maple Leaf, and that was me. I mean, just imagine Matt Sundin, Darcy Tucker, Ty Domi, and all those guys. Brian McCabe, Carberlay. There's some really good players that I had a chance to be around, which was really, really cool. And I'm really proud of getting a chance to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs, one of the original 6 teams. But it was. Unfortunately, I didn't make it as a starter. I wasn't really good enough, I think, at the time. But I got a chance to play for the blue and white. That's for sure.
What's it like? We had another guest on recently that talked about how Sweden's become this mecca for producing hockey per capita. I mean, what is it about Swedish hockey that's changed that's made them such a force internationally, and in doing so has produced some incredible NHL players?
It's hard to say. It's just part of the history, I think. As in Canada, hockey is or in Sweden, hockey has been one of the biggest sports ever. I mean, we have soccer or football we see over here, but then then hockey is number two sport. So you start playing from a young age at the hockey schools, and you start in the wintertime. You can, maybe not in Stockholm, but a little bit up north, you can go to the lakes and skate and all that stuff. So it's almost like riding a bike over here. It's like something you learn how to skate, and then you take it from there, and you look up to all these great players that Sweden has produced during the time, and obviously one of the best teams we ever had was probably when we won the Olympics 2006 with all those great players. I would say the best generation of Swedish hockey players that we always put together, I think.
Speaking of international tournaments, obviously the NHL hasn't gone to the Olympics recently. Hopefully that can change. What do you make of like the world elite level talent that Sweden would have against the likes of Canada, US? Because, there's obviously Elias Pettersson, William Nylander, all of these great talented players, and even younger ones coming up like Leo Carlsson. How exciting would that be for the country itself?
I think it would be really interesting to see kind of a measuring stick, see where Sweden is right now. I mean, obviously, I talked about when we won. It's been a while since then, and I feel like after Henrik Lundqvist retired, it was a little bit of a hole on the goalie side. But now with Ullmark winning the Vezina and Markström probably bumping back from hopefully a better season this year, I feel like the goaltending situation looks pretty good as well. I mean, you have Victor Hedman in Tampa, solid defenseman as well, and Mika Zibanejad in New York Rangers that you can put the puck in the net, and then obviously Billy who plays for the blue and white for you guys. So it would be fun to see if they can do some damage.
So, Michael, you're working as a goalie coach now and then these days. Now, I was wondering about one specific thing because I was never a goalie when I played, but one of my best friends was, and I've always been very intrigued by the position. Obviously, changes in development and changes in the way that goalies change will happen over the years. And you're somebody who's been on both sides of that. So what would you say is the biggest difference in the ways that goaltenders are trained in the years 2023 compared to when you came up?
I feel like just to put it in, like I work as a player development for a sports agency, so I do a little bit of a goaltending coaching as well. But I feel like they're more prepared, they're more skilled, they're more ready for what's coming. I feel like from a younger age, you do a lot more skill stuff as a goalie. When I came up, it was more learning by doing kind of thing. Now, like everybody watches YouTube or clips everywhere, and they try to adapt and look at other goalies in a different way. They like getting feedback in a different way than maybe us older player did. Watch your own tape all the time and all that stuff, and go through with your goalie coach. So I feel like the goaltenders coming up now is more prepared at a younger age than maybe we were coming up.
I know you mentioned that like how important the game of hockey is in Sweden, but what made you fall in love with the game? Like, was there one specific moment, and at what point in your career did you realize that the NHL was a possibility for you?
When I retired, I think I felt like a possibility to make the NHL, but no, I started falling in love being a goaltender. I went to games with my dad here in Stockholm, and I always liked the goalie equipment. I don't know what it is, but most goalies I think say that they like the equipment, and the position kind of fascinated me somehow. You're either the bad guy or you're the hero. Like it's nothing in between. It's like a being a ref kind of thing. If you haven't heard or seen from the goalie or the ref during the game, he's done a good job. And I mean, you lose because you have a bad goalie, and you win because of the offense is good. So that's pretty much it. But somehow I just liked standing there at the end of the game and the crowd roaring, and you can all the players come towards you and celebrate. It's unbelievable feeling, actually. That's the only thing I really miss about the game, to be honest with you. Just the excitement right before the games, the nervousness, and then the last 2 minutes of a game when the game is on the line. That's something I miss. The rest I could live without, and obviously my teammates, but the rest I can live without.
I like that you mentioned that players are drawn to the equipment, because that was the case for me for about one day when I first started playing hockey, and then I started realizing I couldn't keep pucks out of the net, so it didn't last very long for me. But the equipment is a very big part of it, so I'm glad you made that comparison. That's our one link right there.
Perfect.
It's funny because I played goalie one game. I started off as defense, and then I went and goal to switch with one player because we wanted to swap roles one time.
Yeah,
11 goals against. So right here, but I totally understand where Alex is coming from with that. But the equipment itself back then and even till right now it's changed dramatically, and this is like early 2000 stuff too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it started to change when I first came in the league. I think it was I think the Garth Snow kind of screwed everybody else, but he had those big shoulder pads. I don't know if you remember that, but otherwise you have to go back and Google it. But he looked like a lacrosse goalie there for a bit, and then the NHL kind of cut down on us, and we had to become a little bit smaller. And obviously, I'm not a tall guy. I'm like I think like 181. So what's that? 6 feet or something? 5'11". So I'm not a tall guy. So I had to depend on big pads or big shoulder pads and be able to reading the game. So that kind of sucked for me a little bit, but.
I want to jump quickly because you already talked about like how great it was to be with your teammates, with the likes of Sundin, Roberts, Tucker, Domi, all of those guys. But you did have a bit of a short stint with Pat Quinn, who is obviously another iconic Maple Leaf, albeit in a managerial head coach role. What was it like playing under him for the time that you were in Toronto?
Very likable coach, very likable. He always stood by his players. He never gave the players shit on the press conference. He could give you shit in the room, but never in front of the cameras or media. But he was just a presence in the room. I remember maybe not the best tactical guy, but his speeches before a game, it felt like you were playing Game 7 of Stanley Cup playoffs, and you had to look at your phone. It was like, okay, it's November 30th, and they were playing Atlanta away or something. But he was really good at speeching, and he had great stories to tell because obviously he's been in the league for a very long time. So I was saddened to hear that he's passing a few years back here, and he was a really big Toronto Maple Leafs icon.
What was one story or one speech that resonated with you? It could be very expletive, it could be very straight to the point, but what was one of your favorite Pat Quinn speeches?
It's hard to remember, but I remember just certain things, the way he could pronounce certain things. And I remember, Daniel Alfredsson wasn't a popular guy in Toronto. I remember he's screaming on the bench. Somebody hit that guy. He's 5'6" with his hands over his head. Somebody just take him or whatever, something like that. I remember. And then Karel Pilash was a defenseman. He didn't like him sliding on the ice too much, and he's like, "Carl, you look like a Zamboni out there. You stay on your feet, please." Stuff like that. Not please, obviously. Probably not a word, but he was a funny guy, and I know the players play for him, and he, as I said, he always took the player's side, which was nice.
So obviously, you kick things off at the start of this with the discussion about when you were drafted and when you entered into the league, and I mean, to make it to the NHL is one thing, but to do it with the Toronto Maple Leafs is almost an entirely different ballgame. So I was just wondering, when you go back to the start of your career, was there a specific moment that sticks out in your head where the younger version of you sitting there just thinking, wow, I'm in the NHL. This is my welcome to the NHL moment, whether it was in a game or just like an experience around the team or just a moment where you realized that you've made it?
It's hard to say, but it's almost like it's almost more after your career is done, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That it pops out, and I'm trying to help my sons and other kids to play hockey, and they say like, "Oh, you played in the NHL." I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? I actually did. I remember, I did. I made it as a goalie," and you kind of realizes you and you get goosebumps and all that stuff. But going back, it's just I remember my first start. My first game was in Montreal. I got thrown in when Trevor Kidd got injured, so I didn't get a chance to feel so much about that game. I just got jumped, thrown in there to play that game. But I think the next game I get a chance to start again at home against Philly. That was probably the longest day I've ever experienced. From the pregame meal or skate and through up till the game, it felt like the day was 3-4 days long almost. It felt like it was such a long time before the puck dropped, and I think everybody can have the same feeling when they have their first NHL game. So that was interesting for sure.
One of the things that made me reach out to you was when Boris Salming obviously unfortunately passed away from ALS, and you honored a lot of greats on your helmets when you were in the NHL, and one of them was Boris Salming. What does he mean to Swedish hockey, and what kind of iconic figure was he back home?
He was I would say he's the biggest Swedish influencer, I would say, for Swedish hockey players. There were a few Swedish hockey players in the NHL before him, but he was probably the first one that actually made it and became such a popular player in Toronto. The way he played, the way he took his teammates' side, or the way he played selflessly almost every game, threw himself in front of pucks, and in his memoirs, he always talked about how tough it was with his first few years. He could have easily just went home and became a really good player back home here in Sweden, but he was a really stubborn guy, and he said like, I'm going to really do this. And the way he also is as a person, or as a person, is also the way I think Swedish players have learned from him how to be around the team. I'm not just saying this, but I feel like a lot of Swedish players have a good, what do you say, like people like to be around Swedish players in NHL. We have a good reputation. And I think Borje was one of the first players to bring that over. And this is the way we act, you know. This is the way we do. This is the way we play a team game. And he did all the good things for Swedish hockey players for sure.
Mikael, the Maple Leafs drafted Dennis Hildeby in 2022. I just want to get your take from like the goaltending development side of things that you're doing right now. What can you tell us about his game, how it's developed since being drafted, and what can Maple Leafs fans expect from him in the future going forward?
I mean, it's tough. I feel like if you're going to be a goalie in the Toronto Maple Leafs market, you have to be such a strong mental guy. Like that's the main thing. I mean, all the goalies that come through the system or are drafted or play for the AHL are such good goaltenders nowadays. Like there's none that can't stop anything. It's how you can handle the pressure. How can you handle the media? How can you handle just to relax between games? And you said, like, for me, it was like back then it was obviously a lot of pressure too and all that stuff. So it wouldn't almost been better for me to play for another team first and then come to the Toronto Maple Leafs when I was more mature. Being a young guy coming in, it's a lot of pressure, and you're supposed to be the next guy. And I mean, after me, there was about 10 other goalies that they try to get into the same thing, but it's tough. I feel like you need to spend more time doing mental stuff and all that stuff more than doing stuff on the ice, I feel like.
I have to ask, I noticed you spent a few seasons in the KHL. I mean, we kind of hear stories about what it was like playing in the KHL, what the living quarters were like. What was it like for you playing in Russia?
Wasn't too bad. I was a half a year in a team called Kazan, Akbars Kazan, and then I got fired from there, so it wasn't too bad. And then I played for a team called Riga, Dinamo Riga, that is in Latvia, which is a totally different place. It's almost like playing in the rest of Europe. So it's a little bit different, but obviously going to different places in the KHL is it's interesting. Let's put it that way. I've been to some interesting places in the AHL as well, but I would say, yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain. A lot of these cities are like big factories, basically. And people go to factories in the morning, they go on the bus back home, maybe go to a hockey game, and then in the morning, go back to factories again. So it's like some certain cities, obviously, in the US and in Canada as well, but it feels like they're 40 years behind somehow.
And I'll just close it out here with one more. And again, we appreciate all the time that you've given us.
Yeah, no worries.
Is there a spot in the house that you have your Toronto Maple Leafs number jersey hanging in the walls?
I actually have a little bit of downstairs from me. I have my draft jersey, and I also have my puck that I got for my first win in Montreal. So I have a little bit of a memorabilia place, and I go there once in a while to pinch myself and say, like, fuck, you made it, you played in the NHL and all that stuff. And sometimes I don't believe it, but my wife actually said, like, you know what, yeah, you actually did. But it was a hell of a ride, let's put it that way. I mean, I was good enough to play in the NHL. I wasn't good enough to be a starter, but you know what, that's life sometimes. You know, I did what I could, and it took me to the NHL.
Well, I'll tell you right now that starter or not, just speaking for my situation, like I said, that first year that I started watching hockey, I think you only played one game that year, but just to be able to chat with you about your experiences considering you were one of the first Leafs goalies I ever knew about as a young hockey fan. It was a really awesome experience for me. So
Perfect.
Thank you very much for taking some time to join us today. And I just figured I'd check with you before I go ahead with this, but I write for the Leafs Nation, a website, and I was thinking of potentially taking our chat today and making an article out of it, just catching up with you and getting your takes on certain things. I was just wanted to clear that with you and make sure you're okay with it before I go ahead and do it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
All right.
if there's anything you would like me to add afterwards, just send me a text at Twitter or whatever. So we'll figure out. So
awesome.
No
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
Very
Appreciate
much
it.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks
so
for
much
having
coming on.
Yeah. Take care, guys.
See ya.
Talk to you soon. All right. Bye.
Well, guys, wonderful to have Mikael on here, and he certainly had a lot of good takes, a lot of good memories, and I would have loved to get his story behind getting fired from a KHL team. That was an interesting little close there, but otherwise, as you guys mentioned, wonderful to get a guy like that on. Alex, like you said, it was one of the first goaltenders you remember from
Dude,
falling in love with the Maple Leafs.
Like my first ever program that I got when I went to my first ever Leafs games, it was Andrew Raycroft, J.S. Aubin, and Michael Tellqvist. Those are the three.
All three goalies.
Mikael Tellqvist. I've been pronouncing his name like a dumb Canadian this entire time.
Yeah.
It's all right. We get to be the dumb Canadians. Remember.
Our whole brand is being dumb Canadians. That's right.
Hey, we're the non-pronunciation podcast, so we just pronounce things however the hell we want. And I'm number one for that. So, anyways, as we said, thanks a lot to Mikael for coming on and joining us. I know like I said off the top of the show, Peter, I fucked up the time and unfortunately
it happens, man. It happens.
Man, maybe I'll fly down one day and realize what fucking time it is. Anyways, boys, thanks again for joining us today. That's 2 epis in one day. That's a new record for Sticks in the Six, and we'll be joined next week for more from the boys at Sticks in the Six.